And this sort of dynamic, of course, brings us into the whole area of narcissistic organization and the tragic effects of a narcissistically colored early environment, which can be subtle and doesn't have to rise of the level, to the level of some full-blown narcissistic personality disorder. It would, of course, include that, but it doesn't have to in order to truly affect us and to shape and to color that early template that we all arrive into adulthood with. So when we're in a narcissistic relational field, a simple way to understand that. I mean, I think it's important to discern this a bit because that word narcissistic and narcissist has sort of exploded into society and into the collective and is used a bit loosely, to really point to someone who is particularly self-absorbed or really selfish or caught up in their own neurosis. I think it's fine to use the term that way, but psychologically speaking, if we want to get a bit more differentiated, subtle, nuance, there's more to it than that, actually. And so with narcissism in the family, what that means is that the little one is not going to be able to be seen or apprehended as a subject in their own right, as a being with their own interiority, with their own subjectivity, with their own soul, to use that language. But instead, they're seen and related to merely as an object in the awareness of the other, as a reflection or an extension of the other. And it's a situation where we're denied our interiority, denied subjectivity, which is a denial of soul, a denial of being itself. And as you might imagine, this has a profound effect on the development of our emotional life and of our sense of self, which is very fragile and tenuous in our early years. It has a way of really interfering with what Winnicott calls our going on being, our coming into being as an individual self with our own subjectivity, with our own interiority. So with narcissism or with within a field of narcissistic organization, for the narcissist, other people and the world really are seen merely as an extension of one's own self and not as a valid interior individual subjectivity of their own. And so from that, because they have no worth or they're lacking in that worth in and of themselves, the value of the one subjected to narcissism is in the degree that he or she is able to really serve and fulfill this caretaking function. How well can I prop up mom or dad's or, fragmented, undeveloped, fragile sense of self? The better I'm able to set aside my own needs and privilege theirs, the more love I might receive, the safer I'll be, the more likely that I'll survive. And it really does go to that level. It's a survival level matter, emotionally, psychological survival, existential, spiritually, and even physically in some cases. And to the degree that I'm not able to do that, to repair that sense of fragmentation for them, prop them up in that way, to that degree, I'm going to be shamed, humiliated, ignored, neglected, dismissed, abandoned, or a lot worse. So, in these early configurations, the little one's sense of self very understandably becomes tangled up in the other's moods, in their anxiety, in their deep fear and shame, and in their profoundly injured self esteem, self structure. And the job of the little one is then shifted from unstructured play and discovery, from coming into being, and to tending to the unlived life of a caretaker. A task that, again, is just not designed for a young nervous system, nor for a tender little heart. And so that's the template that some of us, just as an example, may come into adulthood with. And until that psyche and soul patterning is illuminated and reorganized, it will inevitably orient and color and shape how we see ourselves and others. It will affect our lenses of perception and our tunnels of reality, how we navigate in the world, and especially in our close relationships. And so I think to start to illuminate these templates and really to bring them out of the shadow is one of the real essences of this work. And in this slowly over time, we come to see that while, yes, it's accurate that these templates have their origin in our early historical biographical experience. That's true. But that they aren't ultimately about the past. They're alive now. This organization in Psyche, in Soma, is alive now. They're not really about the past. They're here and now. Alive in our implicit memory and in our neural networks and our muscles and our cell tissue and the way we breathe and our patterns of thinking and emotional reactivity and our strategies to keep us out of a deep primordial layer of vulnerability, survival level anxiety, even an annihilatory sort of sense of panic. They're serving an important adaptive function. They're not just neurotic or evidence of how messed up we are. They're intelligent. And because we can't change the past, we actually can't. We can't go back and redo the past. Fortunately, it's not required for the deep, lasting, cellular, synaptic sort of healing that many of us are longing for. Because that material is here now, we don't have to go into the past to heal it. It's all alive in our bodies and our nervous systems as arousal and as symptomatology of all kinds, as well as hidden away sort of in what we call the psychological shadow, appearing as figures in our dreams or as strange moods that come out of nowhere, as looping spirals of shame and grief and rage. And especially how all of this presents itself in our close personal relationships, which include any relationship where I've taken the risk to allow another person to matter to me. I believe last time we touched into, or might have been the time before, of why this might be such a risk, as it opens us to those two great archetypal potentialities in relationship. That on the one hand, I'll be abandoned, left behind, forsaken, forgotten, or on the other hand, overwhelmed, engulfed, enmeshed, fused, and lost in the other. where my entire soul world is swallowed up in them. I mean, do either of those sound familiar? I mean, these are archetypal, universal human experiences, and they're not evidence of some sort of cosmic error or mistake or pathology or some way that I failed or something's wrong with me if I have these concerns, these fears, these trepidations. They're natural, organic movements within the psyche that can be portals and pathways of awakening, of healing, of initiation, if and when they're illuminated and they're tended and they're taken as path, not as pathology, but as path. And so maybe some of you, some of us, include myself, have or have had or are having a really hard time. Like it brings up a lot of anxiety or panic or fear around, say, asserting a need in one of our relationships, or even if acknowledging that we have a need or that it's okay to have a need can be really terrifying for some of us. That it might even be okay at times, or even skillful, intelligent, compassionate, wise, to privilege our own needs over those of another can be really shaky territory for some of us. Or say to enact a boundary, say no, stand up to show up to say no, to take the risk that someone will be disappointed in us, or they'll get angry at us, or they'll shame us or reject us if we do so. If we truly stand up for ourselves, if we assert a need, if we enact a boundary, if we say no. I mean, we've learned that to take care of ourselves, many of us have learned this, will inevitably lead to that abandonment, disappointment, rage, shame, whatever. And there can be this subtle and often existential confusion, I think, about where we end and where the other begins. And this unconscious conclusion that caring for another, that being a kind and compassionate and authentic person requires that we disavow our own psyche, our own body, our own heart, our own soul. And in the face of some decision or choice that we've made, we might find ourselves wondering, have I disappointed them? What can I do to make them feel better? Should I take more responsibility for their anxiety, their discomfort, their fear, their rage, their shame, for that unfulfilled longing in their hearts? They're clearly upset. Surely that's somehow traceable back to me, right? I failed again. I'm broken. There's obviously something wrong with me, and on and on. And again, remember that these voices and conclusions can be subtle. They're not usually all that conscious. It's not always obvious that we're organizing our experience in this way until we begin to go behind the veil a bit and to see, to start to step out of that particular matrix and allow our perception to be cleansed, which is the healing and the spiritual path, the cleansing of our perception and the polishing of our hearts, the ripening of soma and its intelligence.